All right. Welcome to another episode of the Amazing Marketing Minds podcast. This is a very special episode. I'm personally very excited to have Bill Hartzer here in front of me today. He's a technical SEO consultant, been practicing SEO since 1996. He's been featured all over the place, interviewed by CVS, featured on the Search Engine Journal, founder, executive, and president of several organizations. Bill, thanks for coming.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Bill, this is being recorded before you do the event with us at the Triangle Marketing Club later this evening, and I believe the topic for the event tonight is doing SEO audits. Correct?
Yes, very specifically, technical SEO audits is probably about 80 or so, 75% or so, 75 to 80% of the work that I do.
Okay.
Are technical SEO audits, where basically somebody is having an issue with their site, or maybe it's an agency that's bringing onboarding a new client. And the first thing really that I do, or I recommend do, is an SEO audit to see, basically pull all the data, look at what how this website is doing well, what their issues are, get everything down in writing, and then
absolutely
use that as a plan going forward. And then you'll know, okay, well, we need to fix these things first, and then we can have a strategy going forward.
That makes sense. And you help with the strategy too, I'm guessing. So you come in and you're basically identifying the issue and creating a blueprint for them to execute on, or for you to do.
Yes, right? Exactly.
That sounds cool. And then if you're watching this podcast, you probably already either been to the event or the event video is available. So as I ask you this now, you haven't done the event just yet, but what would you say is the most important takeaway for those who haven't seen it as a reason to go and watch it right now?
Well, I think it's, you have to consider that, an SEO audit is a whole process. I mean, it's actually not just, it's not just running one tool or one or two tools and then, taking those results or whatever they say and looking at those and trying to figure something out. It's kind of, it's a whole process of gathering the data, then moving into an analysis phase, and then making the recommendations. And so it depends on, and keep in mind that whole process is based on, preliminary research that you've done with the client and finding out about, all the domain names that they own, right, all the SEO that they've done in the past, if they have done any, what their plans are, who their competitors are, all that, all that information is just, we get it, and it's good to put that together. And then you can get it in writing, get it in documents or spreadsheets, or however you're going to do it, and then figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do with that information? Are we going to, is this kind of an agency play where we're just, we're going to use this as an action plan, or is just basically a one-time audit where somebody comes and say, okay, audit my website, tell me everything that's going on, and then give me a plan of what I need to fix and go forward. And then I'll take it from here. I give it to my web developers and move on. And so it kind of, there are several reasons to do, an audit. I mean, there's sometimes, it could be all of a sudden they've just lost a bunch of traffic with an algorithm update and they need to figure out what's going on. So, go through and audit everything and find out a lot of the issues that are happening.
Interesting. So, if you guys haven't seen it, definitely stop what you're doing, go watch it right now. Bill definitely knows what he's talking about, but you've been doing this for so long. How did you first get into this? You've been doing this since 1996. Did you wake up and say, this is what I want to do forever? Or how did you end up?
No, actually it kind of started, I graduated college in the, early 90s and actually with a English and technical writing degree. So I was really, into writing and writing, and doing basically computer software manuals and instructions and so forth.
Yeah.
And so that brought me into understanding HTML. And actually I was coding SGML on a mainframe IBM computer in the 90s. And so that I got to where I could code basically raw HTML and basically create a website. So, so anyway, that at that point it was, you know, Alta Vista and Excite and Netscape and so forth, and basically what I realized that you could run some banner ads and get clicks and make some money. So I was having my, you know, full-time job at the software house and you know, writing during the day, and then
Yeah.
I would, you know, then and create, you know, kind of hand create websites, basically affiliate sites.
On your
So I
free
did
time.
affiliates, and then, you know, then I started buying, at that point started also buying domain names and so forth, and creating even more websites. So then basically that brought me into a job at in Dallas where I was doing basically online help for some software, but that kind of helped me moved into a role there where I was basically a webmaster role where, you know, for an international software company, a telecom company. And at that point, actually, I kind of moved into doing in-house SEO in 9 different languages. And the SEO concepts, you know, I know, and then we had at that point, you know, early 2000s, we still had, you know, kind of Google Translate and so forth.
Right.
But
right.
we actually, the concepts are basically the same with, you know, you know, at that point, you know, title tags, metadata, content. We were still talking about keyword density at that point,
Really?
and doing, you know, and just, you know, massaging pages and doing internal linking and so forth. And so then I just moved out into the agency world and went through the agency world, and around 2008 or so, we decided at one agency that it would be good to do SEO, you know, SEO audits, and we started a template and so forth. So, you know, for maybe 10 years or so, I've had a template and a process that I go through, to, you know, to basically cover everything, from crawling issues to, you know, on-page issues to linking issues and so forth.
Now, throughout the entire time, probably, I guess, like up until you got to the agency world, was that a lot of that just self-taught?
Yeah, yes, basically. And it was kind of not only just, you know, there's no, yeah, I mean, it was actually all self-taught because of the fact that, you know, the funny thing is that there was back then, you know, you could actually, if you had the certain keyword density of a page or a paragraph, you put, you know, your title, your keywords in your title tag, and it had the perfect keyword density for that search engine, you could rank within minutes. And so it was kind of a game. People were starting to hide their code through cloaking and so forth, so that you couldn't see their code, because once you saw someone else's web page or page source, you basically copy the page source and, you know, literally just, you know, take the keyword, you replace the keywords with, you know, whatever keyword you wanted to rank for. Right. And so it was literally all self-taught. Is there wasn't really any kind of, you know, process of, you know, now we're thinking about, you know, user intent and, you know, keyword, you know, still kind of thinking of keywords and content and engagement and so forth. But that back, you know, back in the 90s, and I'd say up until about 2005, 2006, we had basically, you're looking at other sites that were already ranking and looking at their page source and figuring this stuff out. And that's how you could, you know, do that.
Reverse engineering, basically. Yeah. That's cool. You mentioned too that even back then you were still dealing with, you know, meta tags, titles, and talking about keyword density and everything. At its core, do you feel like SEO has really changed that much since then? I know there's always little changes all the time, but I mean, do you think a lot has changed?
So it's been interesting looking back at, say, you know, this whole process. It's funny because, you know, at this point in time, it's now 2019, almost 2020.
Right.
You know, honestly, we've gotten to the point where, like, SEO, I feel like SEO is fun again, at least for me.
Yeah.
The reason why is because we're actually still, you know, it was all in the 90s and, you know, 2000s until about 2000, you know, say 2006, 2007, it was a lot of it was still on page.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of it was, on page and on site things and factors. And then we come into a phase where it was all about links. It didn't really matter, for several years. It didn't matter whether you had the keyword on the page or not. If you had enough anchor text links, you could rank and rank well. And so it was like everything was off page and it was a little bit more difficult. But now, and obviously we got to a point where people were buying links and selling links and so forth. And frankly, I never actually bought links. I actually sold links. So basically what I would do is, because of my writing background, I would get up in the morning before my day job and I would post, and I had, I'd buying expired domain names, putting up a new blog on that topic, and basically, and writing up to about 16 or so blog posts a day. And then basically we got, I had about 80 to 100 different blogs.
Yeah.
And basically I sold, it was text link ads, and I sold and Google AdSense, and that's how I, supplemented my income. And that was a lot, still on page, but it was still linking. But what I've seen in the past, though, I said it's, SEO is fun again, because now it is about code. It is about making your page load really fast. It is about, using, JSON, a schema markup, and actually getting back to stuff on, and content on your site that matters. It's not just, you need that trust you need some links, and sure, you need links, but now it's a little bit funner for me, because I can actually go to a page, optimize it, do some things, or on a site. And then I can also literally go into Google Search Console, tell them to recrawl the page, and within minutes, I have seen better rankings. I've seen, in that whole process of just not worrying about links, but actually optimizing a page properly, marking it up properly, using the old traditional, everything from, title, meta description tag, H1, H2, H3 tags, having a table of contents on the page, having, internal links on that page to different sections, things like bulleted lists, numbered lists, tables, that kind of, and images, optimized images, and so forth. So it's optimized, now you can go and optimize, tell Google to come crawl, and you can actually see, sites that are more powerful and have more trust, they get indexed, within seconds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, but other sites that are, it might be a day or two or a couple of days, but it's still fairly quickly.
Right.
So you can see those results, and then, and even if it's optimizing for, position 0, which is the feature snippets, you can literally go in and optimize a page now, and get a feature snippet in 45 minutes. It actually, you see the results of your work pretty quickly. It's not like, okay, well, for years it was, we had to get these links and we had to wait a couple of weeks, and and we made changes. Now you can actually get down and actually do the work and make a change and see rankings.
Interesting. That makes sense. I can see how that's definitely a little bit more interesting.
Well, what's interesting is, so if you've been in my shoes, in where I've seen this whole industry grow from its infancy, where we didn't even have anything called SEO, to now, what's interesting is there's also, I've seen this. So basically, around when the SEO was starting, there was a lot of, everybody was trying to find the loophole or the hole in Google, or where you could do something and get a really good ranking because you did this one thing. It could have been maybe redirecting a domain or something, something like that.
Yes.
Where it's more on the black hat side. These basically where you would find holes in Google's algorithm and so forth. Well, back when, that was when we had Matt Cutts around,
Yeah.
and they were continually plugging those holes.
Yeah.
Okay. And those, the Google engineers, the web spam team were basically going through and they were, finding all those things. What has happened is, which is interesting is to me, is that, okay, a lot of those holes and a lot of those issues got plugged and so forth. Well, now, the web spam and the developers who were working on the algorithm back in, say, 2005 to 2010,
Mm-hmm.
they're now long gone. They don't work for Google anymore. Okay. We have a whole new set of engineers who are going back and looking at old code. And they're coming back and saying, well, why does the algorithm looking for this? Because, that's kind of a weird thing for people to look, for us to look for. And they will actually my feeling is that they wipe out some of sections of the code. And a trick or a hole that a black hat or someone was using back in 2005 all of a sudden is working again because their new engineers
Didn't realize
that
oh,
reason why we were looking at expired domains and through one redirects this way is because they were buying expired domains and doing redirects and all that stuff that way. Well, there's a difference between the engineers that are there now and the ones that were plugging a lot of these black hat holes that are there. And so what's happened is that there are all of a sudden a lot of things like that
popping back up.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
that are popping up that people who have not been doing SEO, very long, only, 5 or 10 years, they don't realize that there's all these other things that are possible.
Interesting. That's so cool how things are progressing over time. And especially, I mean, someone who's been doing this for so long, how you're noticing those patterns and you're noticing kind of things. I feel like it's kind of adopting a cycle a little bit. But I mean, at some point, like before we met, I had obviously done a ton of research. I was looking into you just to have an idea of who I was about to meet. And I mean, you've been featured on a lot of, reputable websites. You've done a lot of really cool speaking engagements.
Sure.
At which point during this career, you've been doing this a long time, at which point did you think to start doing speaking engagements and doing things like that?
Well, probably, I would say when I was in-house, I was in-house at a telecom software company, and basically I just put my name out there to speak. I think the first was the search engine strategies up in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, cool.
And so, and obviously SES has been, now kind of replaced by SMX, and over the years, but I did that as an in-house. And then I started, around 2004, started this Dallas Search Engine Marketing Association.
Yeah.
And kind of just have been around as speaking and just, the whole, I look at speaking and I look at, the whole process is it's not at all about me. It's about, I want to take any information that I have and give it to people who can use it.
I think that's what makes it so easy too.
So it makes it easy for me. And that's my, I'm not out there speaking to promote my name or anything like that. It just comes naturally. Mm-hmm. But I want to see this next generation of SEOs, of digital marketers and so forth, be successful. That's how we're going to continue with this, the industry.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And just before we started the podcast, I had asked Bill if he ever gets nervous speaking. And he says, not really. And again, I think it comes down to the fact that you're just so good at this. You've been doing this for so long. It's really like you're just talking about you every day. But you were telling me a story about a time when you did actually feel
there's been a couple times. I mean, I've flown all over the world to do, keynotes at different domain name conferences and so forth, and spoken about SEO and audits and sometimes, as a speaker, sometimes it's the odd moments and things that happen that you can be prepared and you can be speaking to hundreds of people, and then sometimes it's odd that sometimes I was in Dublin, Ireland, speaking or asked to speak at the Domain Name Association
Mhm.
event, and there were some pretty powerful people there who knew a lot about marketing,
Right.
and it was a very small group, about 10, 20 people or so. And I think that one time stands out a little bit more, where actually, was pretty nervous about presenting the data and the research that I had done regarding domain names and and so forth. And so that was a little nervous for me, but I got through it. And I'm sure sometimes as a speaker, sometimes you feel that you're nervous and you feel that you're gonna, or you notice the mistakes that you do or while you're speaking, but the audience really doesn't realize that. And so sometimes we tend to overanalyze things like that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's true. Because I know that's a particular story I was referring to, because you'd mentioned that you've done speaking engagements with thousands of people,
Sure.
and you were less nervous about those than
Yep.
kind of a close knit environment. So it's definitely very interesting. I also noticed too that you'd recently been sort of interviewed by CVS. I think it was something very brief. They were just
Sure.
asking about whether or not government could influence Google searches. What was that like? Did they just give you a call on the phone, reach out, so they wanted your
Yeah, I
input
mean,
on
it's
something?
it's a lot of these opportunities like that, where where you get interviews with mainstream media and so forth. A lot of that is really about who and through connections. And so it was actually a friend of mine in the industry who was in he was part of he had the connections, and a reporter called him and said, "Hey, I need to speak to and then next 2 hours I need to do interview with somebody who knows about this." And so he referred me.
Interesting.
And so there's and basically they the CBS van left their studios and drove down to my house and interviewed me.
That's so
So
cool.
2 hours
Interesting.
later. So yeah, it was pretty fun, and interesting. Um,
Did you ever? Well, I noticed too that you also launched a podcast. You have a couple of a couple of episodes that are trending pretty well. I think your most popular one's an interview with Lily Ray. What made you
yes.
start the podcast, by the way?
Well, basically, just wanted to, I basically wanted to. I well, I have had kind of a private podcast with a group that for a year or two that where they pay, and to be a member of this group.
Okay.
And so and I do a weekly podcast for that particular group.
Kind of sounds. Have you ever heard of
So
like the masterminds that people have?
yes, it's kind of like a masterminds. It's not the SIA, which is the strategic or SEO intelligence agency. Then
Oh, interesting.
they do a lot of SEO testing.
Okay.
So they wanted to find out, does a keyword in the title tag help rankings or it doesn't? And, those really specific, tests. There's
Interesting.
different there's a Skype group and Facebook group and a podcast and so forth, all involved
Okay.
in that.
So you already had experience doing it.
So I have, so I decided that, okay, well, let me go ahead and start a podcast, and I'm still pretty much doing a weekly interview with somebody,
Okay.
and then publicize, putting it out there.
How do you find your guests? Like, is it just every?
Primarily just actually it's because it's basically looking at the people who are speaking and people who are the influencers in the industry.
Yeah, yeah. Which I'm sure you've come
And
across so many.
and so I have through networking, and what I've done is basically put out a call for people to be on my podcast, and I have people booked up every week until March of April of next year.
Oh, that's so cool.
So It is. Have some interesting people coming on.
Oh, we'll make sure we'll have to link your podcast too,
Sure.
so people can watch. So we are recording this towards the end of the year. I'm not sure if this will be released this year or early next year, but any word of advice to listeners for 2020? Anything notable worth mentioning that might be coming up this year, that people should be aware of, or anything like that?
I think that,
It's kind of a big question.
sure, it is. There's a couple things. I mean, one thing that I can't stress enough, and with people and you think about your agency and you think about taking time, to promote your agency and your brand.
Mhm.
Okay, but honestly, I've been doing this for, let's say, 20 years. And through that, I have been at a couple of different agencies and have a couple of different jobs. And what has helped me personally is to think of not only just promoting the agency or the company I'm working for, but think about yourself and think about when it comes down to it, put your name in Google and what shows up. And that is, that's personal branding. That is being aware of your particular personal brand. And sure, you're going to, spend 5 minutes or so a week, make sure you have your own domain name, make sure you have your, your everything, your profiles and your image and the way, and because people do, and I've hired people and I have not hired people because I put their name in Google and seen what comes up. Okay.
Right.
And so, yes, I mean, there was, anyway, so be aware of just don't be aware of your personal brand and and that has afforded me a lot of opportunities that I probably would never have had, because I have, written content, written articles, written, with my name and had my own, website and blog and so forth. And I've gotten to the point where I've been able to go out on my own because I've been working on my personal branding
this entire time
for years. Yes. So that's that. But then that kind of is interesting because that kind of goes into what we all SEOs need to be shifting now. It's about entity SEO. And so you think about, so entity, I don't know if you've ever heard that term, entity SEO. We think about when entity, you think about the Google, the knowledge panel or the knowledge graph. Okay. So you have two things. When you do a search for, let's say, a celebrity name, pick your favorite celebrity and do a search, and you will have basically the knowledge graph entry, which has information about them.
Yeah, it has all sorts of stuff.
It has it has a photo or a couple photos that has their, their date of birth and their, what they do and the company maybe they worked for, what industry they're in. It might have some links to their, to their Twitter or their Facebook or their YouTube channel or whatever. And so they're actually they're on the knowledge graph. So the knowledge graph includes people, but it also includes, people, companies, and basically things, and sometimes some concepts. Basically, those are entities. Okay. And those are basically the main, keywords like, social media would be have a knowledge graph entry. And we think about, you kind of relate it to Wikipedia and having a Wikipedia page. That's how that's one way to get into the knowledge graph is to, so the goal here should be, as an SEO, to try and get either your client name into the knowledge graph, get or one of their executives or their founders or whatever into the knowledge graph. Basically, as far as looking at SEO in the future, you get so much more trust, you get so much more authority when you have when the company or the individual is actually in the knowledge graph. Now the knowledge graph is shared among search engines. So once you're in the knowledge graph, you have an entry for on Bing knowledge
Mhm.
graph, and you also so if you do a search on the right side, there will be a knowledge graph entry. And then if in some cases where if it's a company, they may also have a knowledge panel below it, which is actually from Google My Business.
That makes sense.
So
Yeah.
that's, that knowledge panel on the right side. Sure, you can go and get a Google My Business listing, but that's different
It is
than
different.
having a knowledge graph entry.
Yeah. Well, I think we've definitely all seen them. And it's interesting that you mentioned that. I'm sure there's a lot of information on, trying to get on the knowledge
Yeah,
panel.
and there's actually, so there is information. It's just preliminary. Dixon Jones has been has been doing a fair amount with educating us and educating me on how to get something in a knowledge graph. You don't have to have a Wikipedia page. You can be in the Internet Movie Database. You can add yourself there if you
That's
potentially
relevant.
have
Yeah.
a podcast, or you're at a point where you have a SAG card. I'll have to tell you, later on how I got my SAG card from one tweet. I made one tweet on Twitter, and that landed me a Screen Actors Guild of America SAG card. Through that whole,
That's
the whole
crazy.
process.
If you guys want an example, just Google Bill.
Yes.
Just Google him and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. And I do want to hear more about that, but we are running out of time, Bill. This has been huge. I think this is just a snippet. Again, this is
Sure.
another reason why you guys need to stop what you're doing and go watch the full, presentation he did for us at the Triangle Marketing Club. There's so much knowledge that you have to share, Bill. I can't stress it enough. But where can people find you? How can they get a hold of you? Where can we point them to?
Sure. Just Google my name, Bill Hartzer. Also, I have a blog at billhartzer.com, and also my agency or consulting site is hartzer.com.
Perfect. You heard it, guys. And we'll include links as well whenever
Sure.
this gets posted, wherever you find this. So definitely check him out and then check out the full episode, like I said. But in short, guys, that concludes another episode of the Amazing Marketing Minds podcast. Again, Bill, thank you so much for being here. Guys, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this with a friend. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks again.